Before we begin Unit 16, here is the answer to the Unit 15 question. The best answer is choice A.
Although reducing reliance on high-input agriculture and investing in sustainable farming, supporting research in aquaculture and genetically modified food sources, and providing governmental subsidies to offset food prices are all prudent practices, a country achieves a state of food security when it is providing reliable access to a sufficient quantity of affordable, nutritious food. Unit 16. Food Fight.
You're probably unaware that the human species is at war with insects, plants, and other forms of nature.
Pests compete with us for food, and as far as they are concerned, humans seem to be growing crops just for them.
In natural ecosystems, every organism has at least one natural enemy in the form of a predator, parasite, or disease organism.
However, in our infinite wisdom, we decided to do away with natural ecosystems and instead create massive crops of a few specific species of plants.
With their natural enemies eliminated, the organisms that feed on these crops now have an unlimited supply of food and nothing to keep their populations in check.
Well, not so fast. Humans often find unnatural ways to combat the problems associated with their unnatural activities.
The human solution to the pest problem was the invention of the chemical pesticide. A pesticide is a substance used to kill or control the populations of organisms that humans believe to be unwanted.
There are many kinds of pesticides, each designed to target a specific type of plant, insect, fungus, or rodent.
Conventional chemical pesticides can increase food supplies, are usually financially profitable for the manufacturer, often take effect immediately, and are considered quite safe if used as intended.
However, these chemicals lead to genetic resistance. In other words, after several generations, the organisms that the pesticides were intended to kill adapt and become resistant to the chemicals.
The problem is compounded if the pesticide also kills off an unwanted organism's natural enemies.
Although financially beneficial to the manufacturer, chemical pesticides are an added expense for farmers.
Overuse of chemical pesticides is a common problem leading to environmental pollution that can cause harm to both humans and wildlife.
In 1962, Rachel Carson's publication, Silent Spring, documented the detrimental effects that indiscriminate use of pesticides would have on the environment.
This book led to public outcry and the banning of DDT, a widely used pesticide, and initiated changes in our air, land, and water laws.
Many consider this work to be a significant contributor to the early environmental movement, and it continues to serve as a must-read for all environmental scientists.
Integrated Pest Management, or IPM, is a program that combines the use of biological, chemical, and cultivation methods in proper sequence and timing to keep pest populations in check.
The following are some techniques that farmers can use in place of employing chemical pesticides as part of their IPM approach.
By planting different crops in each growing cycle, insects can be tricked and starved if the new crop is not one that is part of their natural diet.
By growing more than one crop, a technique called polyculture, farmers can introduce additional habitats for pest predator species.
Pheromones, or sex attractants, can also be used to bring predator species into a region, lure pests into traps, or disrupt an insect's life cycle.
Crops can be genetically engineered to be resistant to pests, but safe and nutritious for us.
With the exception of the genetically modified crops, all of these very effective methods of pest control are based predominantly on natural processes and require very little, if any, synthetic chemicals.
It's always interesting when humans attempt to control nature.
Kind of comical how we tend to alter the environment and then try to change it back until it's nearly what it was before we started, isn't it?
Soil quality is another major factor affecting food security. Successful crops need soil that is rich in nutrients and capable of supporting plant structures.
Soil conservation is the term used to describe methods of reducing topsoil erosion, retaining moisture, and maintaining soil fertility.
Heavy rains are going to run down hills and erode soil. To prevent this, farmers use techniques such as creating a series of growing levels, planting crops in rows instead of up and down, introducing additional species in between the crops, or taking advantage of certain plant species that provide complex root systems to hold soil in place.
To combat dehydration, farmers can plant one or more crops in alleys between rows of shade-producing species.
Depending on a crop's nutritional requirements, plants that have root systems capable of returning nutrients such as nitrogen to the ground may be introduced.
Topsoil conservation is the best method of maintaining soil fertility. However, eventually nutrients will be lost as crops are grown in the same areas. In order to restore soil fertility, farmers turn to either organic or manufactured inorganic fertilizer.
Generally speaking, organic fertilizers are made using plant and animal wastes, whereas inorganic fertilizer is produced using various materials that are mined from the Earth's crust.
There's really nothing wrong with using inorganic fertilizer. It's just that it requires much more energy to manufacture and costs more to make.
The advantage is that it can be produced quickly, and people seem to like that it comes in a colorful plastic bag.
There's also a cultural stigma attached to organic fertilizer in that people perceive it to be unclean.
This is rather silly because crops know what they need to grow up big, strong, healthy, and nutritious. A tomato really doesn't care where its nutrients come from, nor does it prefer a colorful plastic bag.
By the way, if you don't know what to do with all of the leaves on your lawn, perhaps you should consider creating a compost pile.
Over the winter, natural microorganisms will break the leaves down, and by spring, you will have your own organic fertilizer ready to use in your garden.
And best of all, it's free.
It should be stated at this point that irresponsible farming practices tend to have devastating and long-lasting effects on the environment. Since farming first began in the United States, a large percentage of the country's topsoil is now gone.
In the 1930s, a prolonged drought coupled with farming techniques lacking in soil conservation practices turned a large portion of the U.S. Great Plains into what was called the Dust Bowl.
This was one of the first true environmental disasters in U.S. history. Thousands of farmers became refugees as their land turned infertile and unable to support plant or animal life.
In response to this catastrophe, a Soil Conservation Erosion Act was passed, and a supportive governmental service agency, now called the Natural Resources Conservation Service, was formed.
Fortunately, the Dust Bowl is once again considered productive farmland. However, this was an obvious example of what happens when humans do not live in a sustainable manner with their environment, and a valuable lesson for us all.
After learning about the many factors that humans must deal with on a constant basis, it seems that we're in one big battle for food. I guess that's why there's still food fights in the school cafeteria. Sorry, having spent so many years proctoring the lunchroom, I couldn't resist. Here's your question for Unit 16.
Which of the following is not a major issue directly related to food production?
Choice A, integrated pest management.
Choice B, health effects associated with inorganic fertilizer.
Choice C, maintaining soil quality.
Or Choice D, proper handling and use of chemical pesticides.
The answer and explanation are provided at the beginning of Unit 17.